A strong wind came up from the southwest, and my father said that we had better take advantage of it and try to reach Franz Josef Land, where the year before he had, by accident, found the ivory tusks that had brought him such a good price at Stockholm. Never before or since have I seen so many seafowl. They were so numerous that they hid the rocks on the coastline and darkened the sky. For several days we sailed along the rocky coast of Franz Josef Land. Finally, a favoring wind came up that enabled us to make the west coast, and after sailing 24 hours, we came to a beautiful inlet. One could hardly believe it was the far Northland. The place was green with growing vegetation, and while the area did not comprise more than 1 or 2 acres, yet the air was warm and tranquil. It seemed to be at a point where the Gulf Stream influences is most keenly felt. On the east coast there were numerous icebergs, yet here we were in open waters. Far to the west of us, however, were ice packs, and still farther to the westward the ice appeared like ranges of low hills. In front of us and directly to the north lay an open sea. My father was an ardent believer in Odin and Thor, and frequently told me that they were gods who came from far beyond the north wind. There was a tradition, my father explained, that still farther northward was a land more beautiful than any mortal had ever known, and that it was inhabited by the chosen. My youthful imagination was fired by the ardor, zeal, and religious fervor of my good father, and I exclaimed, "Why not sail to this goodly land? The sky is fair, the wind is favorable, and the sea open." Even now I see the expression of my pleasurable surprise of his countenance as he turned toward and asked, "My son, are you willing to go with me and explore, to go far beyond where man has ever ventured?" I answered affirmatively. "Very well," he replied. "May the god Odin protect us." And quickly adjusting the sails, he glanced at our compass, turned the prow in due northerly direction to an open channel, and our voyage had begun. The sun was low on the horizon, and it was still the early summer. Indeed, we had almost 4 months of day ahead of us before the frozen night would come again. Our little shipping sloop sprang forward as if eager as ourselves for adventure. Within 36 hours we were out of sight of the highest point on the coastline of Franz Josef Land. We seemed to be in strong current and running north by northeast. Far to the right and to the left of us were icebergs, but our little sloop bore down on the narrows and passed through channels and out into open sea channels, so narrow in places that our craft had been any other craft we would never have gotten through. On the third day we came to an island. Its shores were washed by an open sea. My father determined to land and explore for a day. This new land was destitute of timber, but we found a large accumulation of driftwood on the northern shore. Some of the trunks of the trees were 40 feet long and 2 feet in diameter. I remember that neither my father nor myself had tasted food for almost 30 hours. Perhaps this was because of the tension of excitement about our strange voyage in waters farther north, my father said, than anyone had ever before seen. Active mentality had dulled the demands of the physical needs. Instead of the cold being intense as we had anticipated, it was really warmer and more pleasant than it had been in Hammerfest on the North Sea of Norway some 6 weeks before. We both frankly admitted that we were very hungry, and forthwith I prepared a substantial meal from our well-stored larder. When we had partaken heartily of the repast, I told my father I believed I would sleep, as I was beginning to feel quite drowsy. "Very well," he replied, "I will keep this watch." I have no way to determine how long I slept. I only know that I was rudely awakened by a terrible commotion of the sloop. To my surprise, I found my father sleeping soundly. I cried out lustily to him and started up. He sprang quickly to his feet. Indeed, had he not instantly clutched the rail, he would certainly have been thrown into the seething waves. A fierce snowstorm was raging. The wind was directly astern, driving our sloop at a terrific speed, and was threatening every moment to capsize us. There was no time to lose. The sails had to be lowered immediately. Our boat was writhing in convulsions. A few icebergs we knew were on either side of us, but fortunately the channel was open directly to the north. But would it remain so? In front of us, girdling the horizon, was from left to right was a vaporish fog or mist, black as Egyptian night at the water's edge, and white like a steam cloud toward the top. A fierce snowstorm was raging. The wind was directly astern, driving our sloop at a terrific speed, and was threatening every moment to capsize us. There was no time to lose. The sails had to be lowered immediately. Our boat was writhing in convulsions. A few icebergs we knew were on either side of us, but fortunately the channel was open directly to the north. But would it remain so? In front of us, girdling the horizon, was from left to right was a vaporish fog or mist, black as Egyptian night at the water's edge, and white like a steam cloud toward the top, which was finally lost to view as it blended with the great white flakes of falling snow. Whether it covered a treacherous iceberg or some other hidden obstacle against which our little sloop would dash and send us to a watery grave, or was it merely the phenomenon of an Arctic fog, there was no way to determine. By what miracle we escaped being dashed to utter destruction I do not know. I remember our little craft creaked and groaned as if its joints were breaking. It rocked and staggered to and fro as if clutched by some fierce undertow of whirlwind or maelstrom. Fortunately, our compass had been fastened with long screws to a crossbeam. Most of our provisions, however, were tumbled out and swept away from the deck of the cuddy, and had we not taken the precaution at the very beginning to tie ourselves firm to the mast of that sloop, we should have been swept into the lashing sea. After the deafening tumult of the raging waves, I heard my father's voice. "Be courageous, my son," he shouted. "Odin is the god of the waters, the compassion of the brave, and he is with us. Fear not." To me it seemed there was no possibility of our escaping a horrible death. The little sloop was shipping water, the snow was falling so fast as to be blinding, and the waves were tumbling over our counters in reckless white spraying fury. There was no telling what instant we should be dashed against some drifting ice pack. The tremendous swells would heave us to the very peaks of mountainous waves, then plunge us down to the depths of the sea's trough as if our fishing sloop were a fragile shell. Gigantic white-capped waves, like vertical walls, fenced us in fore and aft. This terrible, nerve-wracking ordeal, with its nameless horrors of suspense and agony, of fear indestructible, continued for more than 3 hours, and all this time we were being driven through at fierce speed. Then suddenly, as if growing weary of its frantic exertions, the wind began to lessen its fury, and by degrees to die down. At least we were in perfect calm. The fog mist had also disappeared, and before us lay an iceless channel perhaps 10 or 15 miles wide, with a few icebergs far to our right and an intermittent archipelago of smaller ones to the left. I watched my father closely, determined to remain silent until he spoke. Presently he united the rope from his waist, and without saying a word began working the pumps, which he fortunately were not damaged, relieving the sloop of the water it had shipped in the madness of the storm. He put up the sloop's sails as calmly as if casting a fishing net, and then remarked that we were ready for a favoring wind when it came. His courage and persistence were truly remarkable. On investigation, we found less than 1/3 of our provisions remaining, while to our utter dismay we discovered that our water casks had been swept overboard during the violent plunging of our boat. 2 of our water casks were in the main hold, but both were empty. We had a fair supply of food, but no fresh water. I realized at once the awfulness of our position. Presently I was seized with a consuming thirst. "It is indeed bad," remarked my father. "However, let us dry our bedraggled clothing, for we are soaked to the skin. Trust to the god Odin, my son. Do not give up hope." The sun was beating down slantingly, as if we were in a northern latitude instead of being in the far northland. It was swinging around, its orbit ever visible, and rising higher and higher each day, frequently mist-covered, yet always peering through the lacework of clouds like some fretful eye of fate, guarding the mysterious northland, and jealously watching the pranks of man. Far to our right, the rays decking the prisms of icebergs were gorgeous. Their reflection emitted flashes of garnet, of diamonds, of sapphire, a pyrotechnic panorama of countless colors and shapes, while below could be seen the green-tinted sea, and above the purple sky.